Welcome to tonight's Focus. More than 2 months after his death, music legend Michael Jackson is about to be laid to rest near Los Angeles, a private ceremony for family and close friends only. As millions of fans mourn the King of Pop, we're going to look into his legacy. We won't go over his great songs tonight or the amazing moves that have marked the history of dance. Today we look at the cold, hard cash being generated by the artist. The passing of Michael Jackson was heartbreaking news for millions of devotees across the world, but for others, it's also a financial windfall. Since Jackson's death on June 25th, record sales have been reaching record highs, and that's no small feat at a time when the record industry is in a critical state. Our reporters went to the music meccas in Paris.
It's the eve of Michael Jackson's burial, but it seems he's still very much alive. In his lifetime, he sold 750 million albums. Sales had slowed down in recent years, but since he passed away, Michael Jackson CDs have been moonwalking off the shelves once more. For some of the buyers, it's the first time they've got to know the music and the man.
I listened to some interviews with him and discovered that he was very human, very close to people, and had a big heart. He founded a hospital after he had an accident. He did so many things for the planet.
For others, it's about rediscovering the music of a performer who, though he died at just 50, had a career spanning 45 years.
I had Michael Jackson CDs that I never listened to anymore, but since he died, I came to realize he's really a legend. He's eternal. For me, he's a Mozart, a great musician. I think he'll still be talked about 300 years from now.
Jackson Mania seems to have hit France. In July, the top 8 selling albums in this store on Paris's Champs-Élysées were all by Michael Jackson.
I think people really needed to see him again, to listen to him again. It goes against what people say about music downloads, that no one needs to physically hold an album in their hands anymore.
France's Music Observatory analyses record sales in the country. In its most recent monthly report, the Jackson effect was evident.
In 2008, he sold 200,000 records. This July alone, we counted 630,000 sales. You can see that there's a real craze for Michael Jackson.
Since his death, 1.5 million Michael Jackson albums have been sold in France, 16 million all over the world. As well as his artistic legacy, Jackson is leaving something else for his heirs, an expected $5 million a year in record sales.
So there's a whole business there that's been thriving since Michael Jackson's death. And joining us now to discuss this, Rebecca Leffler, you're the Paris correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter. Now, tell us, Rebecca, after Michael Jackson's death, many people seem to actually be rubbing their hands. There's a kind of irony there that he might be richer dead than he was alive.
Yeah, I mean, people have been running out to buy any Jackson 5 memorabilia, T-shirts, anything. I mean, his death has become a commercial event within itself. And I think that it's sort of like buying family heirlooms or keeping family heirlooms, because people have, of all generations, my generation, other generations, people in France, people in the US, all over the world, have grown up with him or they've grown old with him, and even though he didn't have the chance to grow old. And I think that they're spending, money that I don't know where all this money is coming from in a financial crisis. But
it's surprising that people have so much enthusiasm and willingness to spend.
Yeah, especially on someone who's, not with us anymore.
And also a controversial figure. You think it's sort of reassuring for people? You were saying it's an heirloom from their childhood?
Absolutely. I think also the family has really, and the media, I think, have really tried to remember him as the King of Pop. So I think that people now, when they're reflecting, they're wanting to remember him that way, and so they're, buying things that remind him, them of, especially the things that are really being sold more than ever are the early Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, and I think that, like Michael Jackson himself, fans are trying to remember him as a child, as a young person, and they're not letting him grow old. By buying all of his music and keeping his name alive, I think they're trying, like he was trying to do, to keep him young forever.
Now, we were talking about all the record sales that have been going going through the roof.
Incredible.
What other kind of memorabilia is now being sold with this sort of massive success?
I mean, basically anything having the Michael Jackson label on it, I think is selling. They held auctions even just as soon as the day after his death. I think it made over $200,000. They held an auction in June, and they expected a couple of his signed Jackson 5 albums to sell for a couple $100s, and they sold for, I think, $27,000 each. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and I mean, I think that when any celebrity has passed, we've seen that, Johnny Cash, and the day after he died, auctioned off a lot of his memorabilia. But Michael Jackson, I think that he is the most famous celebrity that we've known in the past, some odd years. And the fact that he's gone, I think that his death is an event more so than the last few years, I would say, of his life were.
Now, who is behind these massive sales and this promotion of, you were saying, the Michael Jackson label, the Michael Jackson brand? Is that his family trying to capitalize on his death? Could it be?
Well, if his family is indeed trying to capitalize on his death, they're really trying to make everybody think that they're doing the opposite. They've said over and over again, we want to use the estate money to pay for the funeral. Meanwhile, they announced this private funeral, and media are going to be there. They've invited media, obviously not inside, but I think that also by making it a private event, they're creating even more drama, and they're making it even more interesting for people to want to watch. I think, if it's a public event, it's okay, anyone can get in. But I think now it's going to be, a media frenzy, who can get the most access. And I think that by making it such a commercial event and such a publicly private event, I think the family is almost capitalizing on his death. But I think it's also because they want to keep him alive. And it's their way of saying Michael Jackson is still relevant. He's dead, but his music will live on. We're going to remember him. So I think they're trying to keep him the huge star that he was, even as he leaves.
All right, well, joining us now to tell us more on this is our correspondent from Los Angeles, Gallagher Fenwick. Gallagher, you're in LA today. We were talking about this private funeral that was made public by the family, but it doesn't look like another mega production today.
Exactly. Well, it is a mega production from the sheer number of journalists who are here to cover it, about hundreds of them from around the world. But from the point of view of the scale of the event, it's certainly low-key if you compare it to the public ceremony at the Staples Center, which was held a little more than a month ago in downtown Los Angeles. As you mentioned, this will be a very, very private event. A very tight security perimeter has been established around the cemetery in order to prevent curious fans from trying to intrude, but the police chief, the LA police chief, this morning was very clear. He's not expecting massive crowds, so this will not be a super production. However, from the point of view of the cost, we're told by one of Michael Jackson's lawyers, one of the executors of his will, that this funeral ceremony will cost an extraordinary amount of money. So from that point of view, it's extravagant, but no massive crowds.
Thank you very much for this, Gallagher Fenwick. Last word goes to you, Rebecca Leffler. Michael Jackson is not the first person to become a lucrative brand after his death. Can you tell us of other precedents?
Well, I think that it's interesting from the U.S. perspective, in the sense that I think something like this can only happen in America, where you can have such a tremendous event with so much media coverage. And I think it also plays into the question of celebrity in America, throughout the world, versus in France, celebrities here, they can go to the bakery and buy a baguette and no one will bother them. And so I think that in their lives and in their deaths, it's very similar. They can have that sort of privacy, but somebody that's as big of a star as Michael Jackson in America, with the whole world watching, I think that you can't escape such a tremendous impact on the world.
Thank you very much for that conclusion. Rebecca Leffler, I remind our viewers, you're the Paris correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter. And that brings us to the end of this half hour of news. We'll be back very shortly with the next bulletin, so don't go away.